I hope my
Live.
Good evening, everybody. Well, I'm here with Simon Bean and John Yates. Just want to do a quick introduction for both these gentlemen. Many of you in the movement will know them anyway, but Simon, I think it's safe to say Simon has been there, seen it, and worn the T-shirt, and he's got his T-shirt on tonight, the Maverick Veteran T-shirt. I know some of the stories that Simon has told me, and they've been verified by independent witnesses. And I think I don't want to sort of big Simon up too much, but I think to say that Simon is Simon Bean MBE, to me, it should be Simon Bean MC, because I know some of the stuff that he's done at the sharp end, up close and personal with the enemy. He's a 22-year veteran. Simon, you did 22 years, was it?
22 years and a bit, yeah.
22 years.
Only had to do the bit because I was naughty. So well, classed as sort of non-reckonable service.
Yes. But let's just say, Simon, I didn't get a long service medal, and I think if I'd have stayed in for 50 years, I wouldn't have got a long service and good conduct medal. But that's another story. But Simon is a seasoned veteran, and also Simon is a seasoned campaigner. Me and Simon have stood shoulder to shoulder since our first demonstration in London in August 2017.
That's right. That's right, Richard. Yeah.
Where there's still dispute over who coined the phrase "stand, fight, and protect."
That's right.
But I was the first one to say it publicly.
Yours is that, mate. I stole it, and I'm quite happy to steal something that's good.
Absolutely.
So yeah. But I have to give you credit for that. You were the one that blurted that out outside the MOD in August of 2017.
Well, that was, of course, a reaction to the lily-livered response of the British government that wanted us all to hide and cower under our tables and chairs next time a jihadi came running into a pub.
You got it.
And we reacted.
Run, hide and tell, wouldn't it?
Run, hide and tell. And I said, we're not going to run, hide and tell. If a jihadi comes anywhere near you, stand, fight and protect. And thankfully, the British public have taken that advice. And every time a jihadi's attacked ever since, he's been sorted out, put it that way. So I think that was a job well done, Simon. And it was a joint effort anyway. Want to introduce John now. Obviously, John did a live stream with me last week, and I've known John again for probably 2 years or more. And John is a true patriot. He's a political activist. He is one of the most intelligent and coherent commentators and analysts, I think, of what's happening in the world that I know. And John, the reason John is on this live feed, I think it's safe to say that John has probably seen more political violence than the vast majority of veterans have ever seen. John was born and brought up on the Shankill Road and saw some dreadful things happen in the years that he lived up there. He's a true Shankill Road man, and if there's one thing about Shankill Road men, they've got some steel and they've got some metal and they've got some backbone, because they had to have that to survive the onslaught that was put upon them by the dastardly Republican murder machine. So that's the three of us. You all know me anyway. I'm just the guy that gets up on stage with a big gob and shouts at everybody and hopefully galvanizes a little bit of passion in the movement. But we're here tonight because there's a lot to talk about. We're going to launch a new initiative for veterans probably towards the end of the feed. But I think to put it in context, one of the things that we can say as we're just going to have a chat as we start the discussion, is that there are two things that are under vehement attack at the minute, and they are truth and freedom. And both of those things are seriously threatened by a lot that's going on, not just in the UK, but on a global basis. And I think we need to talk about that in some detail tonight. So Simon, if you want to kick off, what do you think about the lockdown lunacy? Where's this all going, and what's happening?
Well, I personally think this whole thing's a smokescreen. Now, I'm not saying that COVID-19 doesn't exist, because it clearly does, but I don't think it's any more dangerous than a common cold. I think that the whole thing's been sort of played up so that it will affect directly our freedoms, and our democracy, if you like, and it's all about human rights. Now, I did make some notes about this earlier on. Human rights, how that ties into EU military unification, which has been talked about for donkey's years, and it got written into the Lisbon Treaty in 2009. The Lisbon Treaty, of course, came to life on the 1st of January this year. And by the end of 2022, we should be full-blown members of the EU on a military unification side of life. Now, that's totally separate to Brexit, and it seems to be sneaking under the door whilst we're all worrying about COVID sort of 19. And I'll sort of cover that in more detail in a moment. Human rights seem to sort of come and go, and it depends on sort of who's in charge of your politics in your country at the time, perhaps on your religious belief, perhaps whether or not we're at war or in an emergency type of situation like we are now. All that can affect your human rights and your perception on life in general. Now, we'll all know, and you'll be absolutely spot on with this, Richard, because it's your kind of thing. Freedom is freedom, but it doesn't come free. Somewhere along the line, somebody's paid for us to have this freedom in the free, democratic Western world. And we have the right to life. We have the right to the freedom of speech. We have the right to the freedom of assembly. And we have the freedom to protest. Now, that's all known as unalienable rights. And they are written in, believe it or not, into our constitution. They're part of common law, which is slowly getting eroded away in favour of statute law. Now, common law basically says we can do anything we want, provided it's legal. But as common law starts to be eroded and statute law takes over, those things that we can do are becoming less.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the fascinating thing about what's happened, and we were talking about this a bit before we came on air, is the speed at which the whole of the UK population has capitulated to this. I believe the media, unfortunately, there's only a few of us, there's only a small percentage of the population, even now after all that's happened, that don't trust the media. No, that's not true, actually. I think the proportion of people not trusting the media has gone a lot higher now. But the reality is, people like, I call him the panicking Piers Morgan. You know, he's been shouting at the TV. He wants to I think he wants to lock everybody up until we all die of something else, so that nobody dies of COVID-19. We might all die of starvation because we can't feed our families anymore, or people might commit suicide because we've got so depressed, or old people might die because they haven't seen the families for 10 years. But the panicking Piers Morgan would just like to lock us all up until this thing goes away. But there's an agenda behind that.
Well, that Piers Morgan, he's the type of guy, isn't he, that's always quoting different organisations like the European, what do you call it? The European Court of Human Rights, or European Convention of Human Rights, and all that sort of stuff. And yet our government, and he's had a hand in this somewhere along the line, I'm for sure of that, he's taken us further and further away. There's more and more sort of derogation, if you like, forming between that human rights organisation and our government, that we're actually now in risk of losing our own liberty. We're not going to be allowed to do anything at the rate things are going. And it's all down to the panicking Piers Morgan and certain parts of the mainstream media and driving a political agenda.
And I believe the civil service has got a huge hand in this. And I think this will lead up to a Brexit betrayal. I think they'll basically say, when this is all said and done, sorry guys, we've given you all the money. We can't afford to do Brexit. We're going to have a delay of another year to 18 months. I know it was in the manifesto, but look at what's happened. All these people have died because of COVID-19. And again, I'm like you, Simon. I've had the virus or something that if it wasn't the virus, it did a very good impersonation of it. Now, obviously, we can't get tested, as we all know, but I've had something that was very, very unpleasant. And you know, I can see, I mean, it is certainly life-threatening, but the overreaction by the state is ridiculous. I put a video up on Facebook of, well, Clifford actually put it up for me because I'm banned from Facebook. But there was a video went up on Facebook, and I shot a police helicopter, which must have cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to get into the air and get the crew up there, with support teams on the ground filming a lone swimmer in Donaghadee Harbour. And I mean, this is beyond ludicrous, you know, because they're more worried about local people swimming in the sea than thousands of illegal migrants coming across the channel in rubber dinghies and bringing goodness knows what with them, not just COVID-19, but heinous ideologies, probably terrorist sympathizers and the whole lot of it. And you know, and again, because the media is so focused on COVID-19, it was like you were saying earlier, Simon, nobody's talking about anything else. John, what are your thoughts on this, on where we're going with all this absolute betrayal of human rights?
Richard, as you know, we're probably in the lucky position, I would say, that we can access our mainstream politicians here in Northern Ireland, and which we do regularly. And over a period of, I guess, years, we have been highlighting that the freedoms are basically, they're disappearing one by one. And I know that we're highlighting these things, and I know that we're putting our politicians into positions where they actually should stand up and begin a fight back against these things. Our politicians are unwilling to do so. Now, we're talking about people, you know, that are at Queen's Privy Council level and whatnot. And whenever that I've witnessed over the years that the politicians that we elect are, you know, as I say, they're just unwilling to stand up against this. It has made me think for many, many years that what actually is happening is that our politicians are frightened of these globalists. They're frightened of losing their nest egg for the future. They're frightened of not getting the lordship that they're after and so on, if they rock the boat. And for many, many years, I talked to a lot of people from England and right across the UK, as you well know, and it amazes me how some people they actually trust the government and how they actually believe that, say, for example, Boris was going to deliver on Brexit. Now, I'm not saying that Boris is a bad man, because I've watched him very, very closely over the years. And I honestly think that he set out to deliver Brexit, a full Brexit. But I think when he started to try to deliver it, he began to realize the implications of delivering a full-blown Brexit, because they do the wrong thing nowadays. And such is globalization, that, you know, globalization can turn off your tops. If they want to, you know, they can make things hard for the trade in a country and so on. So I guess that we're locked into this global factor. Now, whenever we talk about Brexit, you know, a lot of people, they celebrated that we left the EU just previously there. But really and truly, did we? I mean, Simon, you had been talking about.
I celebrated in style, John, I can tell you.
Well, I didn't celebrate it, because I seen it as a Brexit in name only, because I only have to listen to the likes of Simon telling me that, you know, that we're locked into EU armies and whatnot through other mechanisms. And that's just one area that I see that these people, they were busy using the 3-year period between the June period of 23rd on 2016 right the way up to this year. They were busy signing us in left, right and centre to this global factor. Now, are we going to be leaving Europe? You mentioned it there. Honestly speaking, I think we shouldn't even be considering Europe right now. We should be looking at this globalization, and that's our clear and present enemy as we speak.
Popping something up that Danny Tomo said there. COVID has allowed all the world governments to take back control of their people. All demos have been stopped. All internal issues within nations have been completely forgotten. That's absolutely 100%, Danny. And I think
100%.
And one of the interesting things is, I think what you're saying is right as well, John, that Boris Johnson is not a bad guy. But I think what happens is when they get into high positions of office, they realize that there is a deep state and they can do nothing really to fight against it. I'll give you an example. The head of the civil service in the United Kingdom, I'm not going to say his name just in case I get tangled in some sort of legal proceedings, but he is also the head of the Special Forces Club. Right now, I want you to think about that. Why would the head of the civil service, who's apparently never been in the military, be head of the Special Forces Club? There's only one reason. Because the Special Forces Club is made up of people who have been in the Special Forces or who have been in MI5 or MI6. Now, this gentleman was in the Foreign Office for a long time, so the natural conclusion we can come to is that he's a senior MI6 officer. He is the most senior civil servant. He is the go-to man for every single prime minister, I think, from David Cameron on. So when you've got people like that, and I'm not saying anything about his politics, but we know he was a Remainer. We know he spent a lot of time in Saudi Arabia. We know he's a globalist. And I think what Danny's saying is absolutely right.
Yeah, I'm the same. There seems to be a problem with the sound, if anybody can hear me.
I can hear you now, John, yeah.
Yes, we're back on again. Are we, Richard?
I can hear you. Can't hear Richard, though.
No, it seems to be Richard. Seems to be the problem. Maybe his mic's pulled out or something. Anyway, just to continue in case people can...
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me now?
He's back. He's back.
Yeah. I got so excited I hit my mute button.
There you go.
You were on a boring bit anyway.
I was on a roll. I was actually talking about
again on the Boris thing. Again on the Boris thing. I mean, I watched the video last week where Boris had addressed the UN just like at the end of last year, and Boris has the same concerns as we do with reference social media giants shutting down on people's freedoms whilst they're operating here in the United Kingdom. I mean, you only have to take the consideration where what happened to Tommy at the original part, and then yourself, Richard, and other people. For what? I mean, you weren't breaking the law. You were just using your free speech to be able to suggest and say what was wrong within the country. I mean, you're right to criticize bad law. You're right to point out corruption. That has been removed from us. And why would our government permit the likes of these social media giants to do this? Well, as I say, Boris did raise it with the UN last year. And so he does have the same concerns as we do. However, he doesn't have the balls to sit back and say that we're being no part of this. And that's what needs to be done.
I think that's true.
This guy's just brought up another point there. Right. And it's just
this is George here about the NHS nurses pay rise.
Yeah. And that's interesting.
And yet today he sanctioned a 30% reduction in the cost of a new home for nurses and other key workers.
Yeah. And I think what we've got to understand is that the nurses and doctors that are in the front line, the vast majority of them are superb, apart from the ones that are doing choreographed dancing with PPE on, but that's another story. But most of the nurses and doctors are absolutely superb. However, the nurses and doctors are paid very, very good salaries. I'm not talking about obviously some of the lower level nurses that aren't as qualified aren't paid so well, but top nurses and top doctors get paid fantastic salaries. Many of them retire in the late 50s and early 60s with a pension that we would die for, right? And I think from the point of view of Boris voting against the pay rise for nurses, my opinion on that is they get paid very, very well for what they do. And most of the time, they're not actually putting their own lives at risk doing the job that they do. Whereas, anybody in the military who served for any amount of time has put their life in harm's way. So that's my kind of take on that one. Any other thoughts on that, guys?
Well, not really. The only thing that gets me is how, and what's being said there is 100% right. And how people can be manipulated again. Even the MPs are being manipulated. You've got Boris Johnson that before he became PM said, no, I'm not going to vote for doctors, nurses to get a pay rise. And yet now that he's a PM and he's in the middle of this global emergency, this plandemic, if I can use that word, suddenly you can have 30% off if you buy a new house.
Yeah.
So even he's been swayed. And I think a lot of this is part of the psyops that's going on. And the psyops is fed in by the
media,
the lamestream media.
Yep.
And if they repeat something often enough, the government itself even starts to believe it as being 100% kosher, and they turn it into policy. So in a way, we've got a hidden government, an invisible government, a shadow government, if that's what you want to call it, that's actually making the policy, and that is being portrayed to us by the government that you actually see on the television every day.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that the other thing that has been totally lost in this whole, and we'll just speak for another couple of minutes on coronavirus because there's a lot of other stuff I want to cover. But I think the other thing that the mainstream media in the UK is certainly a complete dereliction of duty. They're not talking about where it came from and what was China doing in that Institute of Virology in Wuhan. And I was making videos about this before I got the stinking virus. Basically, it's obvious that where this came from. It's also come out that MI6 warned the government that this virus was on the go in January. So the security services knew that this was happening, and obviously, it definitely came from this laboratory. So why has China not been held more to account by our government, by the media, and by every other establishment commentator? Why aren't people talking about China? Because China's.
I think it's worthy a note at the same time, Richard, that the Americans pulled out their diplomats from that section of China as soon as they got wind of it happening. Now, they pulled them out in December before it became general public news, if you like, on, what was it, December the 31st? And then January, it all started to sort of build up from there. But they pulled their diplomats out early. And at the same time, they pulled out diplomats from all over South America and Central America. And under this smokescreen of COVID-19, bearing in mind that Venezuela is a strategic ally of China, and China are also allied to Iran and to Russia. The Americans last week or the week before moved a very small mercenary force into Venezuela to try and overthrow the government, because that government is in full support of China strategically. And now China, Russia, and Iran have also got mercenary forces hiding in the forests of Venezuela. Now, why is that going on?
Exactly, and the Iranians have had Hezbollah camps in South America for
precisely
at least 15 years.
Exactly that.
You wouldn't. I mean, why would Hezbollah been in South America? Because it's the underbelly of the United States, and I mean, I think the reality situation is that China has made a monumental cock up, but nobody's calling to account because they're all terrified of China, including America.
Right. That's right. And America provides China with 16% of its oil each year, annually, because China is such a big manufacturing source now, and everybody's so used to getting stuff from China because it's cheap, it's mass produced, it's cheap labor, but it's also one of the biggest contributors to global warming because of the amount of the manufacturing process and the crude oil that it's using. And it can only support, and I wrote it down here somewhere, it can only 4 million barrels a day of its own oil is all they can actually produce towards the manufacturing process or towards the movement of their people around China on a daily basis. The other 9.1 million barrels that they need every day, 38% of that comes from the Middle East, including Iran, and 16% of that comes from the US.
And that's
So-
globalization.
Yeah. So could it be that the US are afraid to make too many waves because they don't want to give up the 16% of oil that they produce and hand straight to
And again,
China for big revenue?
it's the globalist, because this is what globalism's all about. And I mean,
Yeah.
our last from David Cameron back. So we've got David Cameron, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair have all made a huge amount of money from basically doing the bidding of China in the West. David Cameron must be the worst salesman on the planet, because he ran around the city of London last year trying to get people to invest in the Chinese initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative, to bring railroad and shipping to Western Europe. Nobody bought. Everybody fobbed him off and said, no, we're not investing in that. It's not a good idea. But that was his job. That's what David Cameron was doing. An ex-prime minister going to an enemy power, and they are an enemy power. They're communists. They want to destroy the West, and doing their bidding.
That's
Gordon Brown, exactly the same on Chinese TV, saying about what a wonderful place China is and how good they are at bringing people out of poverty. What's the other fella called? Tony Blair did a deal between Saudi Arabia and China to sell the Chinese oil, made tens of thousands of pounds doing it. Two powers that most people with a brain consider to be hostile to the values and interests of the West. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with and I'll just call them out. They are traitor politicians, and they need to be called to account for the treason that they've committed. Let's move on from China, because again, we don't want to talk about China and COVID, because there's enough about COVID-19 on the TV. I'm sick of hearing about the thing. I'm sure most of the viewers are as well. Let's talk about the Grooming report. Now, as we all know, Sajid Javid, to his credit, commissioned a report into the exploitation of girls up and down the country that's taken place. Well, put it this way, I'm not sure if I've ever said this before on live feed, but in the 1980s, when I was at school, there was young girls out of my class, sort of 13, 14-year-old girls, getting into cars with Asian men who were obviously 18 or 19 years old. I'm not saying that was grooming taking place, but it had all the hallmarks of it now, looking back in hindsight. So this has been going on for a very long time. Lord Pearson, I believe, thinks that possibly 1 million teenage girls have been raped by the grooming gangs in this rape jihad. And of course, Priti Patel was about to publish the report, and all of a sudden the report is quashed. What do we think about that, and what can we do about it?
I think it's a big embarrassment for them, personally. Anything to do with grooming, like you've got John Wedger, and John Wedger has earned himself a really bad reputation recently by a lot of sort of people that are critical about him and the fact that he's an ex-Metropolitan Police whistleblower, etc., etc. Now, I've known John, just as you boys have known John, for probably at least 2 years. And he's genuine, he's down the line, he lost his job over the head of trying to expose grooming gangs, and it was grooming gangs that were in and around Westminster. Lord Pearson, we've all known him for a good bit of time now, because he was sort of the main lord with UKIP. Great guy. So when he turns around and says that there's perhaps, all these people that have been groomed and that it's worth big money, I would say they're pretty accurate. But there's people that want to quash it because it's such a big embarrassment.
Well, this is this grooming report is obviously into the it's specifically into the Muslim group, and let's be honest, we people tiptoe around this. They are Muslim grooming gangs, 87%, and that's probably a very conservative estimate. 87% of the convictions have been Muslim men, most of them of Pakistani origin, in this grooming scandal. There are others. I mean, Somalis are involved in it, and other other Muslims, and it's going on around the globe. And nobody is talking about it. Lord Pearson, every time, as John Wake is saying there, Lord Pearson has brought this up in the House of Lords on numerous occasions, and he is heckled. He is called a racist and he's called a bigot. Well, if it's happening, I mean, if the boot was on the other foot and lots of white men were taking Muslim girls and raping them in the most barbaric fashions, and we know some of the things that happen. We've all read Easy Meat by Peter McLaughlin. I mean, there's the horrific story of the girl up in Blackpool. There's the horrific story of the girl in Oxford who was going to go and tell the police, and they pulled out a tongue and nailed it to a table. And I believe that the government is coming under serious pressure from the establishment, from people in the civil service. The civil service, I believe, is infiltrated by Muslim Brotherhood activists. The Muslim Council of Britain will be lobbying to keep this silent, saying, well, if you publish this, it's gonna cause riots on the streets. Of course, there's never been riots on the streets over this issue, and I say that to my great shame as an Englishman, because there probably should have been riots on the streets about what's happened with the rape of the daughters of England. But so I mean, what can we do to get this published? I mean, I've seen that MPs have now pushed. There are some good MPs there, Sarah Champion, and so on and so forth. The push to get this published. What can we do to get this move down the road?
We're gonna have to get out and make a noise over this. And I'm not really too bothered how we do it, as long as we do it. And we're going to have to make a big row, because even Lord Pearson told us when we met him in the House of Lords last year, but what he says in the House of Lords is one thing, and he gets heckled, he gets put down for it, he gets ignored, but he's got his X amount of minutes every 6 weeks. I think he has to book it 6 weeks in advance for his 10 minutes of speech time. And if he doesn't turn up on a particular day, well, the clock is reset for that 6 weeks for him to get that question across. So that's one issue. But when he's outside, if he was to go down the local pub and bring up the same question that he brought up in the House of Lords, he can be arrested for it.
Exactly.
Because it's classed as a hate crime suddenly. So if he can't do it as an individual, and I would say that's the reason why a lot of other people in the House of Lords and House of Commons won't make this sort of public, is because in a way you can understand it, they value their job and their money and their security more than they do about making a row about something that perhaps won't be acted upon anyway. And that's where we as a mass organisation need to get out there and make our voices heard.
And I mean, to me, that is the next demonstration that I will be doing my best to escape the prison ship that has become Northern Ireland, and trying to get out of here and get across to the UK. And I think, I mean, Kaz is saying it here on the comments. We need to march on the Home Office as soon as we can. That's absolutely right.
Kaz is 100% right.
And we need to do it on the day when the Home Office is working, and when we're pretty sure that Priti Patel will be in the Home Office, and we need to make a heck of a nuisance of ourselves. Obviously, all within the law and all within the restraints of not breaching the peace. But we need to get outside the Home Office and make things extremely uncomfortable. And I think probably the best time to do it is while this lockdown is still on, because let's just see if 20,000 people turn up in London. Well, we'll all have to social distance, so that's going to make a very, very big crowd. So I think that's what we should do on that. The other thing I want to talk about again very, very quickly is the issue of the new legislation that they're trying to get onto the statute books in Scotland, that's been introduced incidentally by a Muslim member of the Scottish Parliament, the SNP, I think he's the SNP deputy leader or the Justice Secretary for the SNP. And basically what it's going to do is absolutely quash free speech in Scotland. Anybody that's convicted of a hate crime in Scotland is going to be potentially imprisoned for 7 years. Which
who's pushing for that, Richard?
This is the SNP, the Scottish Nazi Party, as I call them. But if I say that in Scotland, Mrs. Cranky,
Mrs. Cranky,
Mrs. Cranky and her little lackeys. What do we think about that? What can we do about these pieces of legislation that keep being pushed time? And Northern Ireland's exactly the same. They're pushing for these things in Northern Ireland in exactly the same way. How can we stop them?
But you've got
Well,
these bits of legislation going in all over the place, haven't you? All the nations have got these bits of legislation going in under the smoke. Yeah, what do we do about it? What do we? Any ideas, John?
It gets to the point, you see. I mean, we've been trying this with our politicians for years. Whenever you've got like what we call a party political machine, the political machine, they say what goes, and it doesn't matter who you elect on a sort of a sub-member basis to this party political machine, because they'll always do what the political machine tells them. So where I find, or where I feel that the answer really lies, is to, I see that you have tried basically putting together a political party, and for the rights and wrongs, it kind of fell apart, and that party was UKIP, which were doing very, very well. But what they're doing in Southern Ireland at the minute. I mean, I visited some of these people just before Christmas in the run up to their general election. And what they had identified was that if they were to put together lots and lots of little independent councillors everywhere, people from the enclaves, the estates, the streets, the towns, where the patriotism is still strong. And if you get your own representatives, and you get them into councils, and you build from the ground up, and you work very, very hard at putting people that are there, that are not going to be afraid to fight with politicians in the political system, and to expose and to highlight the rights and the wrongs of whatever goes on behind the closed doors. Because that is the problem. We've got career-minded politicians today who are unwilling to speak out because they don't want to give up their nest egg for the future. So I think that that's where it needs to be. It needs to be not just a movement, but certainly a whole uprising from the ground upwards, where you dispense with the field top-down approach, and you put in place people that genuinely will represent the wants and the needs of the British people. And that has
John,
to be done.
do you know something? That is exactly the position I'd come to as well, because obviously we basically tried to take over UKIP, and we did pretty well. We had a good go at it. We weren't too far away from getting UKIP as the party of the people, and sadly the establishment, and very, very sadly, really at the behest of Nigel Farage, put a complete dampener on it. But I think of the guys up in the northeast. I think of Mickey Hopper. I'm going to speak to Mickey Hopper and Keith Jenkins next week on a live stream together. Those two guys actually did what you're saying, John. They got power, and we could do it all over the country at local council level, standing as independents. And I tell you what, Keith Jenkins is creating havoc for the Labour Party up in the northeast of England. So that is totally feasible, and I think that's something we've got to look at. I've said this before. I think For Britain and Anne-Marie Waters at the moment are a really good bet. We've all met Anne-Marie. We all know Anne-Marie, and I think what Anne-Marie's doing with For Britain, to me, if there was an election tomorrow, that would be the only party manifesto that I could vote for. So yes, I think we've got to go down the political route. What about this new veterans, this new idea of a new veterans initiative, Simon? What are your thoughts on this whole idea of veterans for truth and freedom? How do you see it going?
We're about now.
Yeah.
So this is our first sort of bit of advertising, if you like, for Veterans for Truth and Freedom. I think the concept is good. I get a lot of people messaging me through Facebook Messenger privately, sort of saying, have you seen this? Have you heard about that? What are the veterans doing about this and that? I think the veterans have got a lot of respect from Joe Public.
Yeah.
And I think that respect has grown over the last couple of years, certainly since the Ariana Grande concert bombing in Manchester, where we've really sort of bit the bullet and taken to the street, not only for against terrorism, but also for veterans' rights, for the Northern Ireland veterans that are facing persecution, prosecution, etc., which is an ongoing thing. And we've got to keep on top of that. We've got to keep on top of that, because next week the Crown Courts are open for business again, so I've heard. So jury trials will begin again. And no doubt Soldier A to Z, Dennis Hutchins, David Holden, etc., are all going to be tied into that. So I'm fully aware that Joe Public has given the veteran community a real boost in the way that it supports the veterans. I think it's about time now that we put our money where our mouth is. We live up to our oath, which we know we signed, and it lasts for life, whether we knew it at the time or not. And I think it's time for us to stand by the people of our United Kingdom, all 4 countries within the United Kingdom, and actually work for that component. So whether if one country's worried about the grooming, we fight that corner with them. If one part is worried about the statutes that are being passed under our noses, we stand by them and we fight those statutes. And if that means that we have to get off our lazy arses and get on aeroplanes and boats and travel to Northern Ireland for something this week and travel to Scotland for something the following week, that's what we have to do. We have to do that because we signed up to that oath. And in a weird way, it makes you feel as though you actually still serve.
Absolutely.
So it brings back, it certainly brought back my sense of purpose.
Me too.
I would have been asking about doing nothing if it wasn't for the movement.
I think that's absolutely right. And you know, it's not really even with me. And I think you're the same, Simon. It's not even a sense of purpose. It's a sense of duty, because I've spoken to you at length about this. It's 100%. Not that, you know, I could quite happily live out my days in Northern Ireland quietly without anybody knowing who I am. You know, I actually don't particularly relish having all the flack that comes my way from headbangers, from the far left, from the Islamists, from the Nazis, or the National Socialists, as I love to call them, because that really triggers them, from all those scumbags that want to destroy our country. And incidentally, if far-right people, if you're watching, if you National Socialist Nazis, you do want to destroy our country. You are enemies of the United Kingdom. You are not patriots. Don't you dare call yourselves patriots. You're traitors. But that's just triggered them a bit more. But all these bits of abuse that we get from everybody, we get hassled by the police. We get, you know, all sorts of stuff. Put it this way, Simon, me and you would never get a job in working for the government anymore. Not a chance in hell.
No, you know? And I wouldn't even want one, because I'm far too honest to work for the government.
Exactly. That door
you know, I'm not a qualified liar. People can
exactly,
you know, so people see through me because I am transparent.
Exactly.
I say it as it is. If you don't like it, tough shit. I'm all for freedom of speech. Politicians aren't so much up for that. So I think we just got to continue the way we go. We've got a huge following of very patriotic civilian people that have ties into the military as well through their parentage and grandparentage. We've got people like John sitting there who knows more about Northern Ireland politics than I would ever know. Even if I went to university for 100 years, I wouldn't learn. So, you know, let's just crack on in our own way, in our own, you know, in the way that only a veteran can, I suppose.
Yeah.
And become a real thorn in people's sides and do something for the good people of our United Kingdom.
And I think one of the good things about this, I mean, a lot of people are saying, well, why another veterans group? And at the end of the day, we're not in any way, I mean, me and you are still members of Veterans Against Terrorism, Simon, and we will be until they either throw us out or you know, it's completely dissolved.
We both lead that, don't we, allegedly?
We do, allegedly, allegedly.
Even though poor old Gurnick Singh and the boys are sort of running with it on a day-to-day basis. Dan's obviously and hats off to them, like.
Yeah, you know, the great, you know, look, Veterans Against Terrorism is absolutely a fantastic group. I was so proud to be able to speak on their behalf and help with different things like the website and the mission statement. And, you know, if there's another terrorist attack, well, we need to get back out on the streets with Veterans Against Terrorism. You know, there's no point in trying to reinvent the wheel. But I think what we're doing with Veterans for Truth and Freedom is we're broadening it, because one of the things I was very alarmed about when the terrorist attacks were happening, what tends to happen is the general public overreact and they want to see human rights legislation demolished. They want to see people, you know, freedoms curtailed. And I don't buy into that. I want to hear what Nazis have to say. I want to hear what socialists and communists have to say. I want to hear what Islamists have to say, because I want to know my enemy. I want to know what their arguments are. So we can refute them and ridicule them and so on and so forth. So I'm not into this nonsense of silencing people, even if there's some jihadi lunatic quoting the Quran and saying, well, we should be beheading the infidel because of this, this, and this. I want to hear why he is saying that and what's motivating him, so that we can either reason with him, and if we can't reason with him, then, well, what can you do? But, you know, so I think we've got to keep truth and we've got to keep freedom going. And like you say, almost like do you remember the flying pickets in the 80s, Simon?
Yeah.
And John, you remember them as well.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
During the miners' strike, old King Arthur had, by the way, that's just for all those people who think I'm a communist. Apparently, someone accused me of being a communist today. But Arthur Scargill, King Arthur, had basically people going all around the country and blocking the entrances to coal mines and so on and so forth. The veterans should have a sort of flying column that goes to hotspots and gets into areas where there's problems, and maybe it's the Home Office this week, maybe it's the Scottish Parliament next week, maybe it's the courts in Belfast the week after, and get ourselves about there and basically protest about these issues, but do it again in a way that isn't extreme, because I think we were talking before we came online, we are actually the moderates. And Anne-Marie said this when I was talking to Anne-Marie, we are actually genuinely moderate people. We're fairly libertarian. We're not telling people not to do things. What we want is freedom for our country, freedom for our fellow citizens, and the freedom to say and behave in a way that we think's proper. And that has been taken away from us by these totalitarian so-called progressives. There's nothing progressive about them. They are totalitarians. And even though I have a great dislike for the Nazis amongst us, I have an even greater dislike and a greater worry about the far left, because they're far more powerful. And we were one banana skin away from having a Corbyn government. And Keir Starmer is far left as well. I don't care how well he speaks or how articulate he is. We have got some real dangerous people in politics in the United Kingdom, and we need to oppose them on every single level. So yeah, that's my take on it. I think it's time to do something new. It'll be a moderate voice, but it'll be a forceful voice. And that's
what's your views on it, John?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would like to take you back for a moment and say that you've got to understand the problem before you try to fix it. Yeah. And, in scratching the surface, I'll tell you, I came across a scenario this week where I seen two guys talking, and I went and done a bit of research after they had talked about it. And there's this thing at play at the minute, and it's called government-controlled disapproval. And what it actually means, and look, let's put them, and I know that we've sort of left the COVID-19 scenario here, but I have to use that to be able to explain how that it would be being used, is that there's things that are propagated by the government, the media, the official narrative that people begin to listen to. And let's say, for example, that at the minute, the NHS, for example, how that, we've all got to support the NHS, we've all got to stand and clap for the NHS, we've all got to like these TikTok videos and so on. Now, try speaking out against that if you thought that that was wrong, if you thought that nurses shouldn't be dancing down corridors and they really should be, protecting the people and looking after the people. If you were to say anything against that, the scenario would develop that people now, because that they're sort of being, conditioned to go after that sort of, or to believe in that, what they would do is they would then, come and they would slander you, and they would sort of run you down. And I mean, a couple of times this week, I've had scenarios on social media where, for example, I'm talking about the, vaccinations, for the rights and wrongs of vaccinations, and they're highly questionable. And I had been speaking about that nanotechnology could be put into vaccinations, basically trackers. And, I mean, I don't want anybody to be putting a tracker inside me. And, the angry mob develops and people rise up against you. And they're almost conditioned to disapprove of anything that goes contrary to what they're being conditioned to. So in terms of, we've got to understand, and I honestly believe that people should be educated. And Simon, you know a lot about this, and how the governments basically would use certain tactics to be pushing out into the community to counter basically, you know, the good messages that are coming through
with their psyops
and whatnot. Yeah,
psyops.
absolutely.
Yeah. And they do that a lot.
So people, you know, I mean, right across the United Kingdom, we've all got different contentions. I mean, in England, I mean, it's Islam in England. Let's not make no mistake about that. In Scotland, they've got the SNP trying to trail them out of the United Kingdom. Here in Northern Ireland, we've got the Sinn Féin IRA scenario and the leftist liberal folk, and they're all trying to trail us into globalisation. And how do you bring all those people together whenever, you know, everybody's got different contentions? And I've been looking at things long and hard for a very, very long time. And I've been promoting a way that you've got to actually, you've got to focus on the things that actually unite you. And one of the things which was a great unifying force was this veterans issue. You know, right the whole way around this country, be it in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and in England, everybody got behind the veterans situation. So I'm really, really glad to see that what you are doing is you are broadening things out in terms of it's now veterans for freedom, and you know, veterans for standing up for the things that would be British. Because at the end of the day, I mean, we can't go on and on and on where look, if we do nothing,
I agree with you,
history.
John. There's
the days history.
We've spent sort of, I suppose, this is probably our third year now, Richard, isn't it? Where we've gone on strictly military issues. And we've expected the good people of the country to sort of stand by us and agree with us and turn up on rainy days and stomp around in perhaps, you know, protests of 70,000. Then we've seen protests. Christ, I've been on some where there's been barely 20 or 30 of us, you know, and it's still achieved something, but not as much as it could have done. And it's just it's about time that we sort of expanded our horizons, fought for everything, because at the end of the day, we're not military anymore. We live in the civilian world now, and so everything that once we didn't much care about does affect us big time now. And we need to sort of crack on. And we know that the government, the police, the social media, and dare I say it now, the military themselves are actually trying to stop us from speaking out. And if I can just bring you up to speed, I don't know if anybody's not a viewer of the UK column, I would suggest they become a viewer. It's free to view. It's on YouTube. It's on a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Friday at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. It lasts for about 45, maybe 50 minutes, depending on the subject matter. They're based down there, sort of near Plymouth. And they talk about all sorts. And they've picked up on something just on Monday, that 2,000 to 3,000 army personnel have formed a new brigade called 77 Brigade. Maybe an old brigade, but they've resurrected it. They've teamed up now with Google, because they're the biggest supplier of social media, and also the police, and they're monitoring all the social media. So they've got the ability now to put fake people into the feeds, stir up a little bit of animosity by putting in the wrong message. That creates a row. They'll let that row run perhaps 24, 36 hours, shut the post down, remove it. Or if they see that it's having their desired effect, which is to destroy our opinions, they'll leave that running for days on end, possibly weeks. Now, they'll also alter the post slightly. So if a post says, "I love Corbyn," they'll perhaps alter that somehow and twist it around, saying that Corbyn loves you. Now, how they actually do that without actually taking away, they're basically changing the context of the whole message that's trying to come across. Now, it's all about incitement of argument, violence through the keyboard, but that could easily, obviously, overspill into violence in the street. So we very quickly become, especially this past 7 or 8 weeks, a police state.
Absolutely.
And as UK column have said, if you look up in the Cambridge dictionary what police state actually is, and I put a post up the other day about the guy that got tased in the filling station.
Yep.
And I put on their heading police state, and it went down fairly well, but I got a right hammering off of a lot of people saying that's what the police are there to do. Well,
yeah,
I don't think so, but that's by the by. Police state definition is government used the police to severely limit your freedom.
yeah.
So
absolutely.
it falls into Nazism, far left socialism, far right socialism. So all these little tactics are being used now to sort of discourage us, if you like, from doing stuff. And we just have to really pull together as a nation of, dare I say, free people at the moment and go against it.
Yeah, working smart and not hard. And
Yeah.
whenever, as I say earlier, that we find that we've got different contentions, yet there's those unifying things, the likes of the veteran issues, that can actually unify and bring people together. I mean, what we tried to do here in Northern Ireland was that we tried to, now with I have to say, with a lot of pushback from our politicians, because our politicians want to continue to control things. But, you know, where people are so easily divided, you see, what you can do is you can formulate a shared set of principles which everyone can unite around. And, you know, you can make those principles on the basis of that. For example, you know, the United Kingdom, it's paramount, you know, standing up for your heritage, your Britishness and all that goes with it. That's another paramount. Your freedom of speech, your freedom of expression, your right to criticize bad law, your absolute right to point out corruption where it exists. You know, you make principles like that everybody can subscribe to, and you make it very, very simple for people to adhere to them. And if anybody wants to stand outside those principles, well, what they do is they're literally writing their own resignation from the movement that you put together.
Exactly.
And that way you can't have a scenario whereby that, although that we've got different contentions in different areas, we're all standing up for this pinnacle, this priority that I would call it. You know?
That's why
I picked up on something that Jimmy Cranky said yesterday, and it was something to do with, obviously, this COVID thing, and the fact that we need to pull together as an island nation. And I suddenly sort of, I thought about it, and I thought, well, if she wants ultimately to use her divulged government to do what she wants, and ultimately she wants another referendum for Scottish independence, the UK ceases to be the UK, in which case we cease to be an island nation, because England isn't an island on its own, because we're not surrounded on all sides by water. Well, nor is Wales, nor is Scotland, nor is Northern Ireland. So where this island nation mentality comes from is us working together as a united kingdom, and in some cases as the British Islands, isn't it? The British Isles, including the Republic of Ireland.
Well, that's
right.
That's what we've been pushing that. I mean, we've got a lot of contacts in the south of Ireland. Some of them at one time hardcore Republicans, and again, I won't mention the people's names because I don't want to compromise them, because obviously I've got a military past. John's from a Protestant Unionist background, but we have got people in contact with us that used to be in Sinn Féin saying, "Keep doing what you're doing. You in saving the United Kingdom, you will save Ireland as well." And I what the conclusion that we've come to, and I'm not putting words into John's mouth, but the conclusion that we've come to is that we believe in the British Isles. We want unity among the British Isles, not that we're all one nation, because obviously that's never going to happen, and it would be wrong to force that upon the Republic of Ireland, but that we are one people. And that's the difference. Right. You can be one people without being one nation, and that's a very interesting concept.
We said it last week, Richard. Let me sort of save my bacon here, because some loyalists would be up in arms about that. I'm really teasing, but
no.
You know, look, everybody's the right to be who they want to be in terms of their nationality, their national identity, and being patriotically proud of who they want to be. And as is an Irishman, in exactly the same way, he's every right to be who he wants to be. And, you know, I not interfere with him, providing that he doesn't interfere with me, is the reality. And there's people from the south in terms of the southern state, and they have actually approached us and they've asked us basically, look, we would like to help you save your national identity in return for what? In return that you would help us to save ours. Because let's not make any mistake about this. Everybody's national identity is under threat by globalization. So there again that's a commonality, and that there's a shared principle which can be used basically to attract those patriots from the south who only want to be Irish and only want to protect their Irishness. And I tell you what, I will stand beside those people every day of the week and twice on a Sunday.
And again, just to reiterate what we're saying here, we're not saying that we give up. I count myself as a British man, as a proud Englishman, and a proud adopted Ulsterman. And I've always said, and I maintain this, that I will stand with anyone that stood against the IRA. I'm not going to try and be condescending and patronizing. I am a proud unionist, loyalist Englishman who believes that Northern Ireland should forever remain part of the United Kingdom. I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, but what I'm saying is there are a lot of commonalities between me and a man in the south of Ireland who sees exactly the same things that I see, with mass immigration, with Islamization, with the progressive nonsense and garbage that we're all having to put up with. And we have a lot in common. I have a lot in common with those, and they know exactly. And I've said to them, I said, listen, I'm an ex-soldier. I am a proud Brit. I'm loyal to the crown. I'm a loyalist. I'm loyal to the United Kingdom, and they know exactly where I stand. And at the same foot, I know that they are proud Irishmen. They're proud of Ireland. And I've said to them, look, let's sort out the problem with the globalists first, and then we can argue over whether Ireland should be united after that when we get that finished with. And I think we'll win that argument anyway, John. But I don't want to upset my friends in the south of Ireland. But you know where I'm coming from. You know what I'm saying there, John?
No, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. No, as I say, and those people will stand together. Look, we've all got a common enemy these days, and if we don't stand together, we're,
And I think it's worth saying that Sinn Féin IRA were never true patriotic Irishmen. They were socialists, and that has been seen very clearly now that the Sinn Féin agenda is a socialist, communist, progressive agenda. Sadly, the DUP have caved into them on this lockdown issue, and we see today, Gerry Adams, the arch architect of the IRA campaign, allegedly, has now been exonerated of any crime in the 1970s. And I wonder what horrific payments will have to be made, not just to Gerry Adams, but to any other Republican terrorist that was interned during the Troubles without trial. This is I don't think people even thought the consequences through of this, what's happened today with Gerry Adams, that he's been let off the hook. And again, we've all heard the rumors about Gerry Adams. We've all heard rumors about what Gerry Adams was doing during the Troubles, and he wasn't just working for the IRA, from what we are led to believe.
Yeah. It was in the Belfast Telegraph the other day that he was working. He was working for the British, and that's what it was in the British in the Belfast.
Has he gone
Telegraph.
through the same historical investigations unit?
No, no, absolutely not.
That's just for British soldiers and policemen and loyalists. That's not
makes a mockery, doesn't it? It's a mockery, isn't it?
Yeah,
we're quite aware that there's people from Ireland that actually would come on live feeds like this, and they're in terms of the Patriot movement throughout the UK, they're our friends, and everybody knows that. So I mean, I would just like
they don't like the Sinn Féin either,
no,
John.
They don't. But I'm just
they know what they're at.
I'm going to point out something, and this is for everybody's ears. But and this is I'm talking about Sinn Féin here, and this is literally an attack on Sinn Féin. So Sinn Féin's this patriotically proud Republican movement who stands up for the rights of Irish people and who wants to bring about a united Ireland. Now, let me tell you the reality about that. You see, in the proclamation from 100 years ago, what does it talk about? It talks about the right of the Irish people to be sovereign, right? The indefeasible right of the Irish people. And that word indefeasible, what does it mean? It cannot be changed. It's not subject to change. To have ownership of the land and to be sovereign. In other words, Irish people, Irish citizens owns the Republic of Ireland, and that's in their constitution. Now, you think of Sinn Féin just a few years ago, pre the Brexit scenario there, where what they were was they were anti-EU. You know, there's plenty of literature out there. You just do the Google on it, and you'll find where they stood up against the EU left, right, and centre when it suited them. But then there came Brexit and the possibility of Brexit, and all of a sudden they changed their tack, and all of a sudden they became pro-EU. Now, you and I and everybody else knows what happens whenever you become part of the EU, or you play ball with the EU, that your the ownership of your land soon erodes. And I mean, that's what the European Union was all about, and now it's globalisation that's all about that. Now, Sinn Féin, per se, what they are doing is that they're globalists, and they're fully compliant with the EU. So therefore, who can say now? There's a tidal wave of opinion and people right across the south at the minute that detest Sinn Féin even more than we do, because they see Sinn Féin giving their country away, given what they seen was what the Patriots fought and died for. They see them giving it away and destroying the Irish state, to the point whereby, I mean, I can remember a little video there not too long ago, and I had to laugh, where there was one man chasing Mary Lou McDonald around the ploughing competition in the south, and he was saying, Sinn Féin's new policy is Brits out, Africans in, Brits out, Africans in. But that's the reality with Sinn Féin. So who can say that they're Republicans? I mean, as Anne-Marie Waters said to me, and Anne-Marie, if you're listening, you might remember these words, but she says, John, nationalism is about keeping your country, not giving it away, and that's for Jimmy Cranky.
Well, do you know something? That's right, because the SNP are globalists as well. I mean, it's very strange. The socialists, the National Socialists, who happen to be globalists as well. It's a bizarre combination. But I think we've got to sort of. We'll probably have to wrap up pretty soon, because we'll go for an hour. I mean, it doesn't seem like an hour, but we've been covered a lot of ground.
Can I just mention something?
Yeah, sure.
Which is going under this smokescreen of COVID, which is a little bit worrying, and it has been talked about by me in London and various other sort of venues, and it's also been talked about by UK Column. But you see how many people are losing their jobs at the moment under this furlough scheme and all the rest of it. The chances is a lot of them won't be re-employed because the company could go bust. Anybody between the age of 16 and 36 under this EU military unification, it looks as though they're going to be called up for conscription.
Oh dear.
Yes, which is so it's like a national service, if you like, but it will be called conscription. You'll be conscripted in, and you'll perhaps have to serve 2, maybe 3 years under that conscription from the age of 16 to 35 out by 36. So double-edged sword, really. British Army sitting at 60,000 strength. That's 20,000 under strength at the moment. So it alleviates that under strength issue. Plus it cuts down the unemployment statistics. So straight away Britain looks great on 2 sides of the coin. But the downside is then that if it goes full-blown EU military unification before the end of December 2022, those lads and lassies could be seconded into Europe to work. And if we have civil unrest on our own streets, we could end up with French, German or Dutch troops patrolling our streets.
Yeah, I think that was always the plan.
Yeah, so I just wanted to get that out there because it's just not gone away at all. And there was a little bit of confirmation on that this morning. So
I mean, it's frightening, isn't it, that we're talking about basically British citizens being conscripted into what is completely a foreign state. I mean, it is the revised Roman Empire. I think from the point of view of what we're trying to do here, and by the way, thanks PC Careman PC for your compliments. But this guy's been getting involved all night and been very some really good comments. I think if we kind of end on a positive note, I mean, we could talk more about, the infiltration of the IRA. We could talk more about the threats to the United Kingdom from all these different sources, from the SNP, from Sinn Féin, from the Welsh nationalists, all of this stuff going on. But I think if we finish on a positive note, I mean, there's some good things happening. This is literally a fledgling initiative that we're talking about now with veterans for truth and freedom. But I think it's the right tone for the moment. Just like after Ariana Grande, Veterans Against Terror was exactly the right tone for the moment. I think this is the right tone for this time that we're in now. And there's other groups out there as well. You think of what Tommy's doing and has done for years, and again, he's much maligned. We all know him. We've all met him. We've all spent time with him. And he's still fighting this fight, and he's still got a lot of support in the country, even despite the whole power of the state being put against Tommy. Here we go. Here's one straight away. Richard Inman is government and Tommy Robinson. They are here to control your narrative. Research Inman does not give a toss about you.
Oh dear.
I love you, Israel. Shalom. Bless you, my friend. Shalom to you. Oh my goodness! Should we put that? We'll put that on the screen just to give everybody a laugh. What can you say? But that's what we're up against. And these people have no clue. None of them have ever pulled on a pair of boots or carried a rifle or come under fire from terrorists of any sort. So go away, cry over your keyboard, you silly little child. And next time there's a demonstration, come and tell it to me face to face. We'll talk it out, brother. I'm sure we'll have a great time. Anyway, enough said on that one. So the Christopher Doyle sums it up. Bullshit. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. We've got some great groups. We've got Hearts of Oak, which are doing a fantastic job. They're doing a job of bringing all these groups together. Hearts of Oak, we've got Anne-Marie Waters, I think, deputy chair, speaking on Thursday night. Me and you, Simon, are going to do next Thursday night with Hearts of Oak, talking about this initiative that we've just launched. So there's a lot of good stuff going on. We are having problems with the far right, the National Socialists, and the Hitler fanboys. These people that watch Hitler videos, sitting eating their cornflakes in their grey-stained underpants, watching Adolf Hitler videos, saying that Germany in the 1930s was a wonderful place to be. But they'll never get anywhere. Yeah. They'll never achieve anything, and they never have achieved anything. And they've got to be called out for what they are. The same as the far left. I mean, the far left are far more dangerous, but they all share. It's interesting. They all share a hatred of they're all into identity politics. They all share a hatred of the Jews and a hatred of Israel, and they all want to take over our country and impose a totalitarian state. So they're all the same, really, aren't they? I mean, they don't believe in freedom, and they don't believe in tolerance, and they don't believe in truth. Anyway, I was just closing off, and that guy put that comment up there that deserved a little rebuke.
Yeah,
good lad.
Yeah. So, guys, that's it. There's Mickey Hopper. Mickey, we're going to get you on next week. Mickey Hopper's going to be on here next week, same time, Wednesday, 7:30. Mickey Hopper and Keith Jenkins, because again, these guys have done what we've been talking about. They've actually achieved their aim. They've got themselves elected to local council, and they're wrecking the place up there. They're causing the Labour Party all sorts of problems, and exactly as they should be. And that's the way to go. If we can get people in local council throughout Northern Ireland, we could create absolute havoc. Same as in England, same as in Scotland, and that's what we've got to do. So watch this space. We've got a lot of plans. We're not going to we're going to keep our powder dry for now. Just final comments, Simon, and final comments, John. If you can both do a couple of minutes each.
I think the priority for us is show the populace, if you like, of the UK that the veterans are still here. And that we're here for everybody. We're not just here for veteran affairs. We're here for all sorts of things as they come up. So if you name something, we'll support it. And the other thing that I think is hyper important is that despite all the criticism, despite what all the different devolved governments and things say, including those in Westminster, is we just need to all stick together. The four countries all sing off the same song sheet, all push for the United Kingdom to remain a United Kingdom, and not cave into anything that any of the politicians are telling us, because we already know it. We can't really trust them.
Yeah.
John,
And I would finish by saying that you know, we can't rely on our politicians to fight for survival in a meaningful or a proactive way. So we're really going to need to do that stuff for ourselves. And meaningful and proactive means getting out, getting boots on the ground, educating people, getting people elected, and taking the country back, and ensuring that the United Kingdom stays as one. And, you know, some people might say that it's the beginning of the end. Well, it's not. It never is. And no matter how far down that road you are, we can always take it in the opposite direction. So that's what I'm going to be dedicating my time, my effort to. And with the helps of people like yourselves, we will save Northern Ireland, and we'll help save Scotland, we'll help save England, Wales, and protect the United Kingdom.
Absolutely.
So thanks for inviting me on, boys. Thank you.
No, John, it's been a pleasure.
Great to see you, John.
Simon, John, thank you very much. And we are a united kingdom, and that's our strength, that we are united. And I think all three of us here love the United Kingdom and want it to remain forever united. And that's what beats in my heart. And I want to see our country saved. And I'm going to finish on the phrase that we said so many times. At the end of the day, what we're going to have to do is stand and fight and protect our great United Kingdom, and we will do that as long as we've got breath in us. Think about Colonel Tom from my old regiment, the Duke of Wellington's regiment. He's still doing it at 100. Bless him. So, well, anyway, on that note, see you all next Wednesday when we'll have Keith Jenkins and Mickey Hopper on. Top guys, top patriots, great stories to tell, and that's going to be next Wednesday at 7:30. I'll just have to tell them that they're on now, won't I? See you all soon. God bless.
Stay safe and well.
Bye bye.
Stay safe. Thank you.